A dowdy, graying 47-year-old stepped out on the stage and proclaimed that she would be as big a star as Elaine Page in the UK. Elaine Page was a celebrated singer and actress in the UK, and the audience, upon hearing this woman say these words, just rolled their eyes. The awkward performer was no Elaine Page. The music began, and after the words, "I dreamed a dream in time gone by," after just that first phrase, the entire auditorium had changed their minds. Susan Boyle might very well just be a superstar after all. Her voice was breathtaking, and within seconds, all the judges and all of the people in the auditorium knew they were witnessing something special. They were on their feet and they were stunned. They had judged her by the package, and they learned a valuable lesson that day, that greatness is not about appearances or first impressions. Susan Boyle, as we know, went on to become a global sensation, and she went on to sell over 19 million albums worldwide, breaking records as the fastest selling debut artist in the history of the UK. There are some good artists that came out of the UK. You might recall the Beatles and a few others. She sang for the Queen. She performed on some of the world's biggest stages. She inspired millions with her story. All of this from a woman who moments before she sang had been entirely dismissed. Susan Boyle's moment was a reminder that we can often judge too quickly, dismissing people based on their appearances or the assumptions we have. But as she stood there, defying every expectation, she embodied a story, as old as time, and something we also see in the story of David, and then in the story of Simon, whom we know as Peter in their calling. Now, Samuel was the guy in the Old Testament who anointed kings. He had anointed Saul to be the first king over Israel. God was fine without having any kings. There was just a system of elders and people, but the Israelites wanted to be just like the other nations, and they wanted a king, and they insisted upon it. And they wanted Saul to be their king. He looked the part. Just as a casting director might cast someone who looks the part, this is what they insisted upon. Saul was not God's choice. And very quickly, Saul proved himself to be unfit as king and lost favor with God. So God sent Samuel to the house of Jesse to find the one whom God would choose to be king. Jesse had a bunch of strapping, kingly sons and proudly brought them all out before Samuel, and Samuel spent some time with each of them and did not get that nudge from God about any of them. So he said, "Jesse, you got to have more sons. I know this is the house and this is the place." And Jesse said, "I only have my little runt kid who's out tending sheep." "Well, go get him." So they sent one of the brothers out, who brought in his little pesky brother. And immediately Samuel's heart started to warm, and he knew that this child was the next king of Israel. So he anointed David right there on that spot. David would grow up and sin greatly. He would do many ungodly things, but always would repent and seek God's ways. Peter was like him in many ways. Simon. Just going to call him Peter, though. He wasn't the obvious choice either. He was not a scholar. He was not a religious leader. He was a fisherman. He had calloused hands and spent his days hauling nets. He was skeptical of most things. His brother Andrew spent time with John the Baptist and had met Jesus and had told Simon about him, but that wasn't really Simon's thing at all. But just like David, God saw something deeper. And one day while they were cleaning their nets after a long, unproductive night, Jesus stepped out and told Peter, go out into the deeper waters and drop your nets once again. Peter had been doing it all night. And just as the crowds in that auditorium had dismissed Susan Boyle, Peter was quick to dismiss Jesus and his suggestion. But there was just something about him, something about his presence. So he did it anyway. He cast his nets one more time, and suddenly there was more fish than any of them could handle. They had to call for help. And Peter, overwhelmed, fell to his knees before Jesus and said, go away from me. I am a sinful man. He didn't feel worthy. But Jesus looked at him, not with judgment, not with dismissal, but with calling. Do not be afraid, Simon, for soon you will fish for people. Just like David, Peter wasn't chosen because he was the strongest or the smartest. He was chosen because his heart was open to being sought, open to being called, and open to going where he would be led. So what does this mean for us? Maybe you felt dismissed or underestimated, like Susan Boyle before she sang, like David before he was anointed, or like Peter before he dropped his nets again. Maybe you've questioned whether you were truly called, truly seen, truly enough. The good news is that God sees what others overlook. God chooses the unexpected, and God still keeps stepping into boats, still calls ordinary people to extraordinary lives. The question is, are we going to listen? Will we go into those deeper waters? Will we believe that we are called? Are we capable of leading a new program, of teaching others? Are we ready to lead the church, to pray at the communion table? When God calls you to step out of your comfort zone and serve in a way that you have not before, how will you respond? When you feel God calling you to pray over a situation, or to pray with one of your friends, or maybe even a stranger, what will you do? I had a similar issue myself when I felt I was being called into ministry. I couldn't imagine God would want someone like me to lead a church, and I resisted my calling. Sit down for this one, but I was stubborn. I was quick to reject nonsense, even if it came from authority. I was kind of mouthy. I never really took much seriously. And I was always quick to point out and notice the funny or ridiculousness and point it out so we could all have a good chuckle. So God, I asked, why do you want someone like me? And God said, listen, I got some stubborn churches too. So here we are. And just like Peter, just like David, just like Susan Boyle, standing at the edge of something deeper. The question isn't, are we worthy? The question isn't whether we have the right background. We're not worthy. We likely don't have the appropriate resume. The only question that matters is, will we say yes? Jesus still steps into boats, still calls ordinary people, still sends us to deeper waters. So what do you think? I mean, what's the thing you've been resisting because you don't think you're enough? It's not always a program or a position that we're called to. Sometimes it's to grow in our faith, to take that step that is unfamiliar and uncomfortable, to grow our spirits. Perhaps we are called to forgive in a way we haven't before, to forgive someone, maybe even ourselves. Maybe we're called to let go of something that we've been holding on to for too long. Maybe it's to mend a relationship that's struggling or broken, or to let go of cynicism and pessimism and to grasp on to available hope that God's providing. Perhaps it's to open our heart once again to love. Where is God nudging you to trust, to step forward, to cast your net one more time? Because if history and the Bible teach us anything, it's that God does not wait for the perfect person. God calls the willing and equips them for the work ahead. I don't know about you, but I want to be the kind of person that when God calls says, all right, God, let's do it. Are you in? Want to go drop some nets and see what happens? Amen. Shall we sing? Please stand, Sherry.